Okay, so I think we are good to go. So I will now introduce you to Matteo Rizzi, co-founder of FinTech Stage, founder of Time Pledge, but he's also wearing multiple other hats. As you can see, he's been traveling Africa for the last 2 years, pretty much everywhere, has met plenty of entrepreneurs and has fallen in love with fostering ecosystems. Matteo, let me unmute you and you will be able to go. Where are you? There is many people. Here we go, Matteo. You can go. Take it away.
Thank you, Rafa. Shall I take control of the screen or shall I use the same?
As you wish.
Let me see. Let me actually share my screen. So if you actually, great, thank you. So I'm now sharing my screen. There we go. I'm putting it. So you exactly. There we go. Indeed. So, Rafa, is that all good? You can see my screen.
Yeah, all good. I see both in your video and the screen.
Perfect. So, guys, thank you very much for sort of joining this session. And I am. Let's go back here a little bit. So, my experience goes back 20 years in mainly financial services, but especially in the past 12, since 2008, dealing a lot with innovation, startups, investment, and as Rafael was mentioning, building ecosystems. So this is an experiment in the sense that in all the sessions of Time Pledge that we have done so far, I was physically in front of you guys, the entrepreneurs. And of course, as a larger community, coaches, other mentors. And this, of course, is going to be a different type of class, I wanted to say. Different because, of course, on one hand, usually I bring people on stage after I sort of give the first tips on how to pitch your startup. And then it becomes a very interactive session. I see that some of you that are connected right now took part already on a couple of sessions. And also, if you see some of the pictures, you see that there is a lot of people coming on stage. Today will not be possible. But we actually shut it down some 4 Time Pledge sessions in Abidjan, in Dakar. We should have gone back to Lagos, but this particular situation sort of made it very complicated to accomplish our mission in person. But we didn't want to let you guys with the impression that we weren't trying. So here we are. It's going to be recorded, and there is also an announcement that I would like to make that Time Pledge would like to make this appointment recurring, also with an open format. So stay tuned on our socials, and I will say it more at the end of the presentation, because we will put you guys in the condition of asking basically anything to the Time Pledge community. And then through different means, be it a podcast or a webinar or an open session like this one, we will be able to answer all your questions. So let's now dive in. What is going to happen as well is that let's be kind of informal here, because I will totally pause from time to time and allow you guys to ask questions, during the presentation. And Rafael will help me in gathering this question, because for some reason now I only have this list of people, and I don't have active speaker. Anyway, Rafael, you will tell me if there is a question, because for some reason I only see my slides, the slides, and the list of people, but I can't see the question. But it doesn't really matter, of course, because I'm the one sharing the screen. That's okay. So moving on. What is super important is that when you pitch your idea for the first time to someone, 90% of what the other person is going to remember is not what you said, but the way you said it. Remember, only 10% of what the other person will retain is about the content, but 90% is actually the way you're going to say it, the creativity you're going to use it, the attitude, how affirmative you're going to be, your energy, right? And this is actually what most entrepreneurs do not remember, is the fact that you could have the best idea ever, but if you cannot sell yourself in the very first couple of minutes of your idea, your pitch is going to be much less effective. And now let's go to our first slide. You're basically your opening slide. And here is a little bit of a story. So since 2008, more or less, I've been watching some 400 pitches per year, so I literally received 400 decks, more or less, in between the decks that I review for different boot camps, or startups that are spontaneously sending me a deck on through LinkedIn or the various channels. And in most of the cases, I cannot understand what the startup or the idea is all about in the first slide. So this, it seems trivial, but something that is incredibly important is that anyone looking at your presentation for the first time should be able to understand what your product, idea, startup, initiative, anything is all about after one or two slides. So there are different ways of doing it. This would clearly be the time where I would open up the floor to any of you to start to make a little trial. But say the company FinTech Stage that Rafael mentioned, and which is basically the mother company of Time Pledge as a social enterprise, right? So FinTech Stage is an ecosystem builder. So we are an innovation consulting company that puts together investors, startups, regulator, financial services players, and technology players to build innovation program. That's it. This would be the first sentence that I would write if I had to explain what FinTech Stage does. Time Pledge is a social enterprise that aims to be the largest free coaching platform for soft skills for entrepreneurs. Again, one simple sentence. You don't need to be, it's okay if you don't give too much details, but everyone works with mental boxes, and here, remember, you're building a pitch to either raise money or sell your idea to a client, or find a partner for your business. In each of the three cases, you need to have the other person put yourself in the right box, because that's how it works, especially if the other person is, for example, an investor, and he or she has seen many of these ideas. Second slide, and then I will pause and I will open up to some questions, okay? So once you stated what your startup does in the first slide, the second slide is the problem you're trying to solve. By the way, Rafa, do you hear me?
Absolutely.
I have a doubt. I am sharing my screen, but in my screen, part of the slides are actually covered by the list of the people. It's not the case for you, right?
Exactly. We can see only your PowerPoint presentation.
Okay, great. Thank you. So the second slide is about the problem that you're trying to solve. So unless you are inventing something completely new that does not exist in the market, in which case, you could clearly state it, most of the startups are either exploiting an inefficiency, or solving a problem, or optimizing a situation that, because of some external causes, sort of is clearly improvable. So that is the problem that you're solving. The bigger the problem is, the most likely your startup is to have a bigger market. Okay, and we will talk later about the market size, how do you size the magnitude of your solution and potential turnover and so on. But here is where you give an idea to your counterparty that your idea or your startup, your product, your solution is triggered by something. That something is the problem that you're solving. Okay, and be specific in describing, even if in a concise way, but describing the inefficiencies that your idea is actually tackling. Now, before I move to the next slide, let's pause here and start interacting a little bit, okay? Because usually there are a few questions on how do I, which sort of words should I use, how long should be the slide, and something like that. So let's see who has a question here. And you can, I don't know how does it work, maybe do the following, like raise your hand so Raphael can unmute you, and you can actually ask a question. If there is no question in the next 5 seconds, I'll just move to the next slide. So I can drink a little bit as well. Nobody?
Yeah, it doesn't seem like anybody's raising their hands. However, there is a question on time pledge. Would you like to wait the end or now?
Let's do it now.
Okay. So any specific region or countries that time pledge would like to be more focused on?
So as Rafa correctly stated, time pledge has started with Africa. There is no like a stone we would like to left unturned in Africa in terms of areas that we cover. It all depends, what are the opportunities that will bring or will able to bring us there. Okay, but there is it's basically Africa to start with. Any other question?
Not for now.
Great. So slide number 1, business description. And actually, Rafa, mental note for next time. We are missing the 90% slide, 10% slide. And it's my fault, I should have seen, but let's add it for next time because it's the opening. And I realized that I was talking about it without actually showing it. So we guys have slide number 1, business description, couple of sentences. Second slide, the problem you're trying to solve. And is, the problem can be a market problem, a person problem, an inefficiency problem, but, you find the right way of describing it. And if you want to size it, size it as well. Like, say, for example, you are an education startup and you have a online product that is teaching, kids from elementary school how to better read and write. Okay, so you can say there are X millions of kids in this country, and that's the part of it. That's a part of them that goes to school, and that is the part of kids that doesn't have access to proper educational instruments. So if you say we want to improve the life of the educational journey of 5 million children in this country, that's a problem that your startup, for example, if we were doing a hypothetical educational startup, is addressing. Okay, that would be slide number 2. Slide number 3, the solution. This is where, actually, after describing your solution in a couple of sentences, after saying the problem you're going to solve, you're going to actually spend 1 or 2 slides where you actually describe what you do, right? And how you do it. So there are basically 3 type of information that this slide or slides sort of need. One is why is your company the best one to tackle the problem? Second, what the solution actually is. And then, if possible, give a little bit of the hint on what the magic is. What makes it unique, right? Frankly speaking, guys, it's okay if your idea is not original. It's okay if it exists already in other countries. It's okay if you're simply copying, without any shame. You're copying an idea that worked in another country because in your country it does not exist. So, because that's, it's not about not being original. Actually, on the opposite, that gives a lot of confidence to the investor to find comparables of your solution in other geographies, especially if the problems are similar, the problems that you guys are trying to solve are similar, and the solution is comparable, if not copied, to the other one, okay? To the one you're comparing it with. So this is where, my view, again, you are actually trying to catch the attention of your counterparty. So be graphic, okay? Don't be too technical. Don't write too much words. Don't start writing, long sentences in your slides. But, if you have a working prototype or a mock-up, this is typically the moment where you start having a screenshot or, a diagram that, tells you tell your counterparty or your audience what the solution is. Remember, unless it's a one-on-one, but if you're like pitching it if you're pitching your solution in, for example, a challenge, a startup challenge, then the visual is going to be very important. So particularly if you have a working solution, that's the moment where you put some concrete sort of either explanation or again a screenshot or something visual that describes what the solution is. We move to the next slide. That is also very important for an investor, and is okay, you understand by now in a couple of sentences the solution, then the problem, my idea, and then the problem I'm trying to solve, and then basically the solution. So how am I going to solve it? And this slide is about how big is the opportunity that I am catching through my startup, okay? And in other words, the market size. Now, what is the most common error that entrepreneurs do when they try to size their market? Is that they have the most common mistake is saying, okay, this is the whole population of my country, and because I'm doing a retail solution like I'm doing a new pen, a new magic pen that everyone can write in a different way, okay? One pen. So my marketing theory is everybody who knows how to write, which is, say 80% of the population. You take out like the kids from 0 to 6 is basically everyone else. So I'm saying, hey, if I can get only 10% of the people who knows how to write, that's the market size for my pen. Well, that doesn't really work, right? Because it is way too simplistic. And what an investor wants to know is what are the likelihood of which part of the population who really, in the case of the pen, would enjoy writing in a totally different way. So for example, I don't know, the writers or the painters or the journalists or whatever, right? So this is the most common mistake to avoid. And it's called the percent mistake. So you cannot simply say, hey, this is the total market. If I only can get 3%, I still get millions of clients, so my market size makes sense, right? That's not the way to do it. A smarter way to do it is basically make it comparable to either other geographies or other places where a similar idea sort of has developed. Think of, like a new taxi ride app, right? So in some African countries, in Mozambique, for example, there is no Uber, okay? So if I had to sort of launch a Uber-like startup in Mozambique, my market size would be, let's find another African countries with similar sort of setting. So for example, there is M-Pesa in Mozambique, so maybe like Nairobi would be a good comparable, right? And see how many Uber and Bolt, who is the other like very famous taxi app in Nairobi, are using the app. That's a X% of the population. So the same X% of the population is likely to be, for example, the percent of the population of Maputo, the capital of Mozambique, to use this app or this potential app. So that's one way of doing it. And of course, it depends whether or not your solution is addressing directly the client, so it is a B2C one, or if it's a B2B. If it's a B2B solution, so you need you're going to use a platform of providers to sell your product or solution or whatever it is, then of course the market size is not calculated or evaluated in the same way. It is rather how many potential partners can I get in how long. Okay, I will pause because frankly speaking, we are roughly at half of the half of the pitch, but this is where the other parts of the presentation are more factual, like the team, for example, or the ask, etc., etc. You will see later on. But the first half is really the more important, also because if you catch the attention of the investor until now, certainly, you are like you're in a good place. Okay, so I'll pause again, and Rafa, let's see if there is someone who raised hands or hand, yes.
I am
Rafa,
scanning. Yeah,
right?
I am scanning all participants. I will start, Matteo, with another time pledge question through the Slido. Somebody is asking, what does the onboarding process for coaches looks like?
So it's a great question. For the moment, the first criteria is to be able to give time. So that's one. Second is to have an expertise on soft skills that can be shared. And by soft skills is typically everything that is not coding. So Time Pledge wants to create entrepreneurs like a project manager, company founders. These are because for the coders we have Andela, and we really want to privilege the building and also the teaching of soft skills like communication or social media or operations or event management. So anybody who has this experience and he or she is willing to share, that would be a good first step. Second is that when it's a physical class, it would be great if this person has already experience in working in Africa. So either because he or she, has to speak at the conference, as Rafael was rightly saying, or because, it's the case of, our coach Megan, who went to Lagos and had a class on the business model canvas. That because KPMG invited her for like a consulting mission, and we Time Pledge sort of build around her the opportunity to teach a class. And at the moment, that's basically it. So, but of course, because this is a sort of a project that we are building as we speak, maybe there is a way that we can, have an entrepreneur or have a coach do some remote class like the one that we're giving it today, depending what the specialty is. So I would say that certainly the criteria, not the criteria, but the action number one is send an email to Rafa. Rafa will share the email with me and the rest of the team, and then we'll get back at this person. And actually, certainly, we will have a conversation with everybody that will write us an email wanting to collaborate. That's for sure. Rafa, more?
No, I think we're good. Nobody seems to have a question. If I don't see anybody, make sure we don't forget you. Write it in the chat or something until you're heard. But at the moment, it seems like you can go on, Matteo.
Great, perfect. So next slide. So after the market size, this is also a slide that actually the next two, 15 and slide 15 and slide 16 are about the same content, but you will see in a slightly different way. So most of entrepreneurs who pitch their idea, they forgot to mention their competitors. And there might be a couple of misperceptions, reasons why they don't do this. One is because, it seems bad to, compare yourself to others, so they don't do this. Second, because, believe you me, it's actually true, they are sort of afraid that an investor will see that they're not alone. There are a lot of other people doing the same, so they will be less inclined to invest. Or the third reason is because they have not researched well enough, and that's also a very bad sign. So competition slide, or the competitors landscape slide, is actually super important. One, because in general, if you are not the only one doing something, that means that you're doing something good. If you're the only one and you're successful, that's amazing. But if you're a startup that can play in a landscape where others had the same idea and implement it well, you can totally either find your space or implement it better, or simply filling a gap that other solution has left in the same space. So there is nothing wrong, on the contrary, to have a competition slide. Now, the way you do it, though, is very different, because you can actually, there are a few ways of graphically doing a competition slide. If you are a lot of companies doing the same thing, you can do the typical sort of template with all the features, and I'm pretty sure that you have seen a few, the mythical, like the green V or the red X, saying yes, we do, we don't do, we don't do. And usually what happens is that if there are 8 competitors and yourself, your company ends up with all the green V, and everyone else has some red cross here and there to show that you are the best, right? Now, believe you me, this is not what an investor wants to see, unless it's true, of course. So don't try to sort of fake your competitive landscape in a way that you only put, what you do because the others don't, right? It is actually a great way to, one, talk about the potential, and even for yourself, when you are in the process of building because if you do your homework well, the moment you have your idea, you want to build your startup, you look at the market size, and then you say, okay, who else is looking at attacking the same market? I'll give you a concrete example. Say, our specialty is financial services, even if Time Pledge, of course, is open to like all type of entrepreneurs. We know how to build digital banks, right? And digital bank like Number 26 or TransferWise or Revolut, or like these guys that are very famous in Europe, are basically a branchless bank. You get a credit card, and then you can pay everywhere. You got an app, very easy. So this, of course, is a type of bank that is addressable to a certain, like a type of population. So in many African countries, there will be no room for more than one, maybe two digital banks. So if you want to build one, you better look at if there is another one, for example. If you're the first one, fine, then compare it with sort of other similar initiatives in other countries. This is what I said before. Or if there is another one, look how fast they grew, since their inception, and taking their growth curve, try to figure out what is the market left. Because if there is no space, you might tweak a little bit your idea to maybe, I don't know, instead of doing a retail bank, do a small and medium business bank. Or maybe do a bank that does micro lending instead of simply holding accounts and make payments, right? So the reason why I'm saying this, and maybe is the time to actually go to the next slide, which is sort of the same, a complement of the competitive landscape, is can I sustain my competitive advantage? And in order to sustain it, will I need a lot of capital to do this? That's typically the case for either solution who needs a lot of marketing to grow fast, or solutions or startups who have a product, who manufacture stuff. Why? Because there are a lot of components in terms of production capacity, raw material, logistic, and stuff like that, who can kill a startup that, statistically speaking, doesn't have a lot of capital at the beginning until they prove to be scalable. Okay, so the slide 15 and 16, they all talk about competitive advantage, because one is more the scanning of the competitors, and second is how can I sustain my competitive advantage over time, to make sure that my startup will stay ahead of the other competitors, or it will be credible in be the one that becomes the market reference. I'll pause again 10 seconds to drink some water. Anybody has a Slido or a question?
We do have a Slido question. So what is the best tools available to check the available solutions? Is there any database, any website you recommend, Matteo, to check what's out there already?
So usually, I don't want to be too simplistic, but Google is your best friend in this case. You need to do some research. Now, and if we are talking about the startups landscape, that should not be complicated, right? So because usually the innovation sort of marketplace or ecosystem in a given country is not that big. So if your question is how can I know if other startups are doing the same, well, my question is, if you're not able to figure this out, then maybe you should not be an entrepreneur, because that's kind of the basic. That means that the network you built is probably needs a lot of improvement. If you're talking about sort of the need of a product, then and I know there is Luis, Rafa, yourself. We have a couple of a fintech stage analysts and the research guy connected. They would totally agree with me that there are ways to, if you know where to look, this is the type of information that Google has. There is no, so for example, there is I would go to Crunchbase that everyone knows, but this is more to find how much money my competitor raised. If you go to Crunchbase, but for this you need to be already a sort of mature startup. If you are like at the seed stage or like a very early, or if you're just like building your idea and finding your very first money, this is there will be no public information of comparable startup who raised some money, right? That's not like a public domain information. But everything that concerns the product and the market size will be it's findable on Google. Hello, there is someone who turned on the camera. Hey, JJ. Rafa, more?
Yep, we have a following question. Should you include an incumbent in your competition presentation, like include a traditional bank in a fintech presentation?
Well, if you think that, say, for example, you're doing an SME lending startup, and there is actually a bank that maybe just open up an initiative, dedicated to SME that is, particularly interesting, but maybe is like slower or more expensive or whatever, right? So the bank will have certainly a better distribution, but maybe a worse cost and a longer wait to get your credit. You would have, the challenging to to the go-to-market, but maybe it will be cheaper and faster. So in that case, yes. Of course, saying that a bank is a competitor because you're doing a fintech is a bit simplistic. But I have seen startups that are building. Typically, for example, if you build a digital bank, there are branches of banks who are sort of fully digital, but they are still part of the big banks. Is that a competitor? Yes, of course. But this is, because for the bank, is likely for them easier to sort of convey some of their own client to this digital bank. But usually speaking, a neobank starting from scratch, it is much lighter, much more user-friendly and stuff like that. So there are other ways to compare yourself to the incumbents, but you have to do it, comparing the comparables. Rafa, more, if there is more.
There is no more.
Okay. Are you guys still alive? It's because I cannot see the chat, but are you enjoying it? Should I go faster, slower? Can Rafa? I just say that write us that you're still alive or something like that, or a smile, or.
Matthew says it's very helpful and he's taking a lot of notes. So see, some other people are alive.
Oh yes, ciao, you who turned on the camera. Hello.
Wait, let me unmute you. Maybe we need a bit of interaction. I feel like Matteo's energy is fading. He needs interactions.
No, my energy is actually not fading at all, but I would love to get it even more pumped up. Please, go ahead.
Here we go, Matthew.
You courageous who turned on the camera. Hi.
We can even hear you now.
Ciao, Matteo. Good to see you. Thank you for this presentation.
Hey, Matthew. Oh my God. I didn't know it was you. Hi. Hey, buddy.
Hi. I'm going to email Rafa for you. I'm excited. Congratulations on Time Pledge. I've been following you.
Okay, so Matteo, for example, would be an amazing soft skill coach. Amazing soft skill coach.
I'm planning to email Rafa. So thank you so much for the opportunity.
Great. So if it was you who asked the question, you don't need your credentials are already, in our brain. So it's okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you. So Rafa, anyone else? Someone is, you think that are,
Well, we have a
alive?
question. We have a question. We have a question from Joel. Sorry if I said that wrong. So, how to segment a problem to be solved on the market?
How to segment a problem
to be solved on the market?
Okay, that's a little bit generic. Can you be more specific? I mean, because every problem, because now we are going to the theory, that's a very theoretical question. But if you have a problem, the problem has facts associated to this problem. So either because this problem is creating inefficiencies and you can measure them, either because this problem is costing the market something. So how much did it cost? It is something that you can measure. So and I don't know if I'm answering, and Rafa, please, whomever this person is, Joel, tell me, but you need to find facts and numbers associated to this problem that are sort of, that can bring you back into something you can measure. Am I making sense, Joel? Joel, say something.
Oh, wait, but Joel cannot speak. I'll try to, because there is quite a few of us now.
Matt, can you please turn down the camera? Because I think let's not eat bandwidth too much. Thank you, buddy. Cool. You cannot find him. That's okay. I'll just move on, and then we can take his question back.
Okay.
Okay, Rafa. Okay, so let's go to slide 17 in the presentation. This is actually something that can be like a breakthrough for your investor, right? So in case your startup has clients or either a minimum viable product that someone is testing or whatever feedback you can have. So the traction slide is the one that will show that what you have done has not been done in a vacuum, okay? And that you're not hitting a problem that nobody cares about, as well as even better, that they have clients. You have clients that gave you some money and bought your stuff, right? It doesn't have to be a lot of them, but if you're able to share the fact that there are clients that are not your sister or your brother-in-law that actually bought your idea and maybe gave you some money, that's a moment to say it, okay? And actually, if I connect this slide to the very first one, okay, if you have traction, you probably want to say it in the first 20 words that you're going to say in your presentation. So we are helping 3 million children to get educated with a new tool, and 500 schools already trusted us with their kids. Something like that. So this is both a first sentence that I would put in my slides, as well as the sort of validation that I am giving to my idea immediately. So that puts yourself, already in a different position. You're not like an idea like is not a noble idea or a solution looking for a problem, or you know, or a dream that hasn't come true just yet. Okay, so traction slide is super important, and here, you know, you can actually traction could also say, guys, we have the product, we have no clients, but we asked 10 banks, and this is what they say. It's not traction, but it is an interaction with your future clients that has something tangible. Okay, I hope this is very important, because you know, again, this is a very common sort of not mistake, but it's a very common sort of lack of mindfulness for young entrepreneurs, is that sometimes they don't think that they can be creative in validating their idea, right? And there are different ways of doing it. You know, customer interviews is one, research is someone else. But here, just to like be completely clear, I was actually talking about actual clients, okay? But what I was saying on top is that you can find ways to validate your idea that are not as good as someone giving you money for it, but maybe giving you, you know, a part of his attention or her attention or her brain or her insights to validate it. Okay. Next slide, number 18. So number 18 of my presentation, but usually it should be a little bit less in yours. How do you make money? This is another typical miss of entrepreneurs. They usually don't explain, you know, how they are going to price it. Is it a recurring pricing model? Is a one-off and you know, a maintenance pricing? Is, you know, is that everybody? Sorry, is everyone going to pay the same? You know, so clearly, you know, this is the part where if we put together the market size and the magic of your solution, this is, and of course, if you have clients, so the traction, after the traction, you say, okay, this guy might not have given me the money that is my final price, but I have a very clear idea of how to make money through my startup, through my solution, through my product, you know, whatever it is that I'm doing here, because that is the model. Okay. Something else which is super important is that you need to be realistic in the way that you're going to measure the cash flow that is coming in, you know, because sometimes if you say, okay, I am signing off, you know, I am selling something, I'm selling an app to like a telco provider, and I'm signing up with MTN, and they have 5 million clients, but it doesn't mean that they are going to, you know, there is a ramp up, you know, of these 5 million clients, and I have to take this into consideration when I give you, okay, this is how I'm going to make money, but this is also the pace at which the money is going to come in. Okay, it's important because it will give an idea, or it will be essential for how much money you're asking to this investor, and that investor is going to be very much reinsured if you say, yes, you know, I have signed these clients, there is this ramp up, so I need to catch up, you know, until my recurring money reach to a level where I can pay my expenses, and this is the reason why I need that money, which is the ask that is one of the last slides. Okay.
Matteo, before you jump on the next slide, I'm going to unmute Joel, and he'll re-ask his questions with a bit more precision.
Of course.
Hi, Joel. How are you doing?
Hi, sir. Hi, sir.
Hey, Joel, go ahead. But now I can't hear you anymore.
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah. In and out, it seems.
Hello, sir.
Here we go. We hear you now.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, go.
Yes, it is a pleasure to have this meeting. It is really interesting. And I will want to know how to find investor in the marketplace. If we
Where
have,
are you?
Yes.
Where are you?
I am living in Italy.
Sorry?
Italy.
Oh, you're living in Italy. Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, and you have a startup.
Yes. I have a startup, fintech startup, and online banking with collaborator. We are working on it 3 or 4 months ago, and we have already have a working prototype and some clients, some customers. But now we want to find investment to launch the project, to launch it.
Okay, it's funny because Joel, if you are in Italy, okay,
Yes.
in Italy to figure out who are the fintech investors,
Yes.
you just need a browser and 5 minutes of your time, right? So there
Yes.
are a lot of, from the fintech village to the fintech district in Milan to the Luis to, there are, so if you were in Togo then, or in Mali, I would understand the question, So the reason is, I want to figure out if your question is who the investors are, which is one question, or the other question is I need an investor and I need to help getting it, which is another, which is exactly, what the problem of every entrepreneur is, right, Joel?
Yes. Yes, sir.
So do you know who the investors are or you don't?
I don't know.
Okay, but what are you doing in Italy building a fintech startup if you don't even know who are the investors?
For now, we have 2 collaborators in France and another 2 in Africa, because the project we want to launch it in Africa and in a year in Europe.
Okay.
Yeah, but yes.
So you know what, Joel? Let's take this. Let's take it offline, okay? Because that's more like a one-on-one answer. I have no idea. Let's talk a little bit. Write an email to Rafa, and we'll come back to you. Okay?
Okay. Thank you.
Great. Anyone else? Since we are in a before getting into the last part of the presentation. Someone raising hands? Rafa?
No hands. Let me check Slido before I let you continue. No, I think we are good.
Great.
Sorry, Matteo. Sorry, somebody is asking if the slides will be available.
And of course, yes.
Yeah, indeed. We will share the slides with whoever would like to. So before you leave the meeting, make sure you leave me your email address, please.
Not only that, but we are actually recording this, so this will be on the timepledge.org YouTube channel.
Matteo, we have a new question from Stefan on business model and monetization strategy.
Yeah.
What is your view on providing realistic and pessimistic scenario in this section? Last one linked to the risk identified.
So
yeah.
Yeah, I get it. So as an investor, I like it. I like it because, especially in, if I put myself in this time of like a global crisis, uh, there will be great ideas coming up from this turmoil, and investors are, of course, much more cautious right now, and someone who realizes that you don't know what you don't know, but there might be external factors that will influence my my conquer of the market. So it will be in between this and this value according to whether or not this events will actually take place or not. I think I like it. It doesn't have to be too complicated, but I saw like I have invested in a few startups that actually presented the model this way. I've seen it, and I think is a good practice if you can make it. Other question, Rafa?
No, just a comment from Stefan that he says he agree and thanks.
Great.
Oh, no, last question now just came in from Jacopo.
Yeah.
Do you have any suggestions for market sizing tools?
So I might have ideas in how to get creative in extrapolating it, but there are, and of course, it's the question is a little bit too generic if I don't know which data we're talking about, right? Because let me give you an example. If you are a financial inclusion startup, okay, there is an incredible report of the World Bank. Rafa and Luis, you know it better than anyone, okay? And financial this in this report, you get pretty much all the data from all the countries, and it is divided by segment of population. So if you have an idea, I'm just making this up, right? For the millennials in Nigeria, there are actually informations about it. Or if you actually have a solution for the Nigerian millennials who has a phone or has a smartphone, these are data that can easily be found in reports. So there are domains who are easier than others. Sorry. Who are easier than others in terms of like finding reports. There is no easy. I mean, I would be a little bit hesitant in buying data from people who claim to have the data you need for something like that, right? I mean, frankly speaking, for an early stage startup, good time spent in in research and maybe sort of I don't know, say finding comparable in other investment that went to the same startup, for example. There are investors report, some of them might cost a little bit, but we're talking about like a few, like maybe $50 to get a nice research. That's it. Unfortunately, there is no go-to place that will give you any market dimension in any possible stretch. It would be too easy. I think that, I mean, again, Google is is possibly the tool that gets the closest to it. Rafa?
No more questions. I think you can continue. Yeah, indeed. Clear.
Great. Thank you. So the two last slides are as important, of course, as any of the before mentioned ones, but this one is possibly ones that is not often in the deck that I see, and especially it is not something that startups usually do when, for example, they do like a contest, right, or a boot camp or a demo day in one of these startup competitions, right? Which is the ask. Okay, so you need to have and to communicate clearly how much money you need and how are you going to spend it. Okay, and over how much time. So it is how much, why, and over how long. This has multiple benefits. One is to your investor or to the person that is, of course, this is a slide that is only useful when you're actually raising money, right? So this will give one a good understanding to the investor that you have done your homework. So how much money are you spending right now? What is, we call it the burn rate. So how much money you're spending each month for what, and how this money is going to ramp up because you're going to hire more people, clearly, or because you spend more marketing, or whatever good reason you have to invest the money. But that money gives you either survival or growth or product. Okay, so there are not a million ways to spend the money. You either do it, you either spend it to grow a solution that you have already, you either have it to perfect a product that you have only in its minimum viable stage, or because you're already in fully expansion mode, but that will like less be the case if you're talking about if we are talking about a rather early stage startup. And this is my own interpretation. Don't say I want $100,000 for 30% of the company. Just ask for the money, okay? And then you will, once you attract the interest, then you do have a price or a valuation of your company in mind, of course. But this is not something that you write, because this is where it is indeed subject to negotiation a little bit, right? So you need to know, you need to have an idea, and the way you evaluate your company is actually is another time pledge course that we will do another time. That's actually how to raise money and how to find the right dynamics in raising money is actually another course that I would like to do through Time Pledge, but is not about the pitching, is much more technical, and is also very important. I notice it that especially in Africa, it might be a coincidence, but there is this culture of, dear graphic designer, I don't have money to pay you, but here, take 10% of the company so you can design my website. I'm exaggerating a bit, but less than what you could imagine. So this type of practice could totally fire back the moment where you actually do have a good idea and you manage to raise the first money, because the investor will say, wait a second, why is this we call it a cap table. So the cap table is the different percent of equity that everyone has of your company, and they say, why there are so many people having 10, 15, 5%, and they don't seem to have a vital role in the company. So all these are mistakes that it is relatively easy to avoid if you have the instrument and the knowledge. But this is not part of today's conversation. We were more into, explicit your ask, have evaluation of your company in mind, but leave it to a further negotiation, and also make sure that you know how this money is going to be spent. Okay, in this slide, we have a couple of links about how to evaluate your company. There is a good reference website where you can actually find a bit of methodology on how to evaluate your startup. Take into the account that especially at an early stage, people will invest in people. So the investors will invest in you as an entrepreneur. The idea is important, but don't forget that, it is very unlikely that the idea that you're pitching, especially early stage today, is going to be the same in 2 years from now. Which is why the investor will invest in the idea, but will also invest in a team that is resilient enough to make this idea evolve and eventually pivot in a way that will actually adapt to the market. Which is why the team slide is also very important. And this is going to be the last one, the last slide that you need to usually is, there are some people who put the ask at the end. Here, the team slide is at the end. Doesn't really change much, because actually the reason why I put the team slide at the end is because if I say we are raising $500,000 to bring the company from here to there, and the reason why we are going to need this money is to do this, this, and this, and we believe we can do it because we have the right team to do this. So the next slide is this one about the team. What do you need to put about the team? First of all, if you are a lone wolf with one idea, it is very unlikely that an investor will put money. Why? Because there is even a term for it. It's called a single founder company. An investor doesn't like it. Why? Because it's not resilient. Because usually the founder is the bottleneck. So it is better to find a co-founders team. It's essential. So assuming you are a team of co-founders, or you have collected the critical assets for your company, this is a slide where, if you are 30 people, you don't put 30 people here, of course, but you do want to put the people that are not only instrumental, of course, for the success of the company, but you also want to try to visually explain why this team is the best one. So, for example, if you have a CTO, a chief technology officer, that is taking care of your infrastructure or architecture, and this person has worked in Amazon or EMC or whatever, or a bank or whatever reference, this is where you put the logo of it. Okay. Or if you have a product manager that has worked in one of your competitors or potential competitors, you put it. Why? Because he or she is going to bring the right experience, the experience that a young startup needs. So don't care too much about. It's not about the pictures or like the how do you say it, or how many people you put it. Especially because we are assuming that we are an early stage or a seed stage startup here, looking for funding. This is more where the combined experience of the team is really complementary in terms of type of experience. So usually you have, an advisor with experience, or if you can find a couple of advisors. For example, I am an advisor for a number of companies, I believe 5 or 6, if I'm not mistaken. And because, you need someone with a bit more experience that, sort of becomes your like a brain counterparty, right? Or that in case of, you need to talk with a regulator, if you're in banking, for example, if he or she gives you not only about credibility, but also, something that is complementary to someone who is like a young, fully digital, full of good ideas. So my point is, try to represent in the slide, to picture in the slide the previous experience of your co-founders, and as well as the critical team, the critical people that builds up your team. And also, as soon as you have a little bit of traction, try to surround yourself with someone who can guide you. Actually, and this is an open, how do you say it? Is almost like an open claim, but I was thinking that part of the time pledge mission could be also to find sort of the right set of advisors for some of the companies, because I realize that especially in some countries, it might not be that easy to find guidance, and this is actually something that can be also done remotely. So that one might be a good idea that I am sharing it with you, sort of thinking out loud, but it is certainly important. So, oops. Yeah. So the thank you note, just make sure this is not even the last slide, is just remind you like the basics. So it should be super easy to find your contacts in the presentation. You would not imagine how many people they end at the presentation. There is no way to contact the startup. As well as, again, seems trivial, but it isn't. The name of your startup has to be in every single slide of the presentation, right? Because again, you start selling yourself. You start putting your name and your brand in the head and in the eyes of someone who is listening to you, right? So these are, again, very basic sort of tricks that will help you make a presentation to be remembered at least at the first conversation. Thank you.
Well done, Matteo. Well done. We have 2 questions from Shaila. You already touched on the first one, but maybe a full answer would be appreciated. So when we talk about the ask, we're asking investors for money. Mm-hmm. How do you value your startup vis-a-vis the investment? And the second question would be, should future traction be considered or work with the current customer base? So
it all depends. So raising money is an art, of course, and it's something that you learn, the more you raise, the more you learn, granted. But it very much depends at which stage your company is. So usually what happens is that, say that in the pure sort of school case, you would start asking, you will bootstrap your company with your own money. So you will put some money, and then you basically start putting somehow your unpaid work as a capital of the company, right? And then you find around you some friends and family. Do I need to give up the presentation, Rafa? No, oh, you do it yourself. Great, perfect. So so I was saying that usually then you look around and you find someone, we call it friends, families, and fools. So you find someone who give you a little bit of money, and if it's your first startup, you start giving a little bit for that money, and the moment where you start actually making an official pitch to an angel investor or to someone who doesn't know you from before, but he or she just has a little bit of either personal money or institutional money because he's like a VC angel, maybe. So this is where you need to start evaluating your company, right? And it all depends in this very same moment when you raise money from someone that you don't know and you need to sell yourself, that it depends at which stage your company is. So if you do have some clients already, and then there are several tricks to be able to give a number to the evaluation of your company that takes into account, for example, today I have 10 clients, I'm making this revenue. It took, Olivier, salut. But Rafa, I let you read the thing, because otherwise I'm losing the
yeah, absolutely continue.
of my answer. So I was saying that say for example that you have a finite number of clients, each one is giving you that revenue. You could think, okay, this is how much it took to sign up this client. Usually the first one takes longer, the other ones take shorter, and then you can make, okay, it is very, very reasonable that given the speed of the ramp up of my existing clients and the speed that I had in the past quarter to sign up new ones, it is actually reasonable that at the end of the year, my revenue will be that much, because in a conservative hypothesis, this is the number of clients that I will sign up, but therefore this is going to be my revenue, okay? And usually your valuation is that's how startups are doing. There are different ways, but if there is not a lot of data you can rely upon, it's going to be a multiple of your revenue, more or less. So if you are doing, say, a couple of 100,000, revenue, or I actually, it is very difficult because now we are generalizing a lot, right? But probably if I take a macro statistics of all the investments I have done or witnessed in the past, since 2008, in the past 12 years, usually the moment you start raising money, you give a single digit to your angel investor, unless he gives you a lot of money. But if he gives this person, the first key people has a single digit, and then the seed and the Series A are in the between 10 and 25%, more or less, so of the company. So if someone and again, this is just generic statistics, but there is really no generic recipe for early stage startups to to issue like a standardized way to evaluate them. Why? Because literally everything is different. So the same startup that grows, in a super crowded market versus a startup that grows in an isolated one can raise two completely different amount at a very different valuation. So this is where, of course, the help of either an advisor, someone who has done it before, or actually even these incubators and accelerators and boot camps that are actually there to, in theory, sustain the entrepreneurs to give you sort of guidance, right? Are helping because you need to know both the market and the potential. You need to like rely onto someone who has, not really a neutral role, but at least has enough experience to have seen enough deal before and can tell you whether or not this valuation, the valuation you're giving makes sense. And of course, this only applies for very early stage startups. Because as soon as we are talking about Series A raising like above $1 million, then it becomes much easier in a sense that you have, in most cases, comparables, in many other markets that gives you a much clearer way on the evaluation. I see 4 people in the chat. If I click,
there's a bunch of questions lined up. Should I ask the first one?
Yeah, go.
So Olivier was asking, I mean, from his experience, it's quite difficult to meet an investor if it's your first startup. Cold mailing doesn't probably work, I assume. So do you have any advice or conferences you should go to if it's your first startup and you don't have, a network of investors?
So it's Olivier is a former colleague of Swift, Rafa. So hey, Oli. So it is actually it's a very good question, and I want to say Olivier is an art to this one. Okay, my very own personal method that I will certainly share when we do the like how to raise money and Rafa, let's make a mental note that this is something that we need to like dedicate a chapter to it, is basically, Olivier, to mash up as much as you can the homework for them. So if I'm an investor and I say, okay, this is, so from here's a pitch deck, cold email, as you said, forget it. It's very unlikely to work. But this is, okay, if I have contacts in common and I have someone who can maybe sponsor or sort of make the connection. And I'm not just sending you a slide, but I'm saying, hey, we are in a market where this is the potential and it is my first time startup, but I have already clients and this is the traction I can demonstrate. And so that's another, putting as much context as you can in a not too heavy and a full of words way, it certainly helps. Take into the account that at the end of the day, this is a pretty much a Darwinian thing because, indeed investors, they receive a lot of unsolicited proposal, and not everyone is the same. I mean, frankly speaking, if I receive if I receive a proper email giving me context, and that certainly conveys the passion of the entrepreneur, I will open it up for sure. Now, my idea is that there are a lot of opportunities right now. It depends also where you are, Olivier. I'm assuming you're talking about European startups. There are a lot of I want to say, opportunities given by different hubs and stuff where investors are invited that gives you the scene. And this is where you need to, you have one shot and you need to and you need to give the right one. And possibly another way is, you're evolving in financial services for the past 20 years, like me, Olivier. You certainly have example of other entrepreneurs. I'm thinking of, our ex-colleague Mark Bratt, who has succeeded. He has a good startup, and like ask him to be your mentor to start with, and see, start giving yourself some space and allowing other people to become the one giving you the advice. That would be also a good advice, I think.
Okay, thanks, Matteo. So we are completely almost 10 minutes after the closing time, but we have a last question, and I think after that we'll close it. So this question is from Stefan again, and he's asking if you don't think that it would be interesting to have a slide with the risk identified and the related action that will be put in place to counter them, even if it's the first pitch. In his experience, it has been pretty helpful and reassuring to the investors to not, give an image of an entrepreneur that's on his cloud.
So to me, a risk slide is I don't know how to say it, but I've never seen personally this type of exclusive content. But I agree that whether it is a little bit in the market size, whether it is in the competition, if there are either market risk, competition risk, external factor risk that could influence the success of your startup, you of course have to say it. Again, we are just to make a zoom out again. We are here catching the attention of your investor for the first time, right? If you have like a 7 to 10 minutes, I would not spend, I would not dedicate too much quality time of my first 10 minutes presentation presenting the hypothetical risk. I will actually go more for the opportunity, okay? But I agree with you that if your solution or product is particularly influenceable for a risk that is actually very concrete, or for example, if other similar solutions have been, strongly influenced by a risk that could come in your market as well, factor it in. Is of course, it is certainly, it gives the investor the confidence that indeed you have taken it into the account. The question is, would I dedicate a lot of time in my first ever 10 minutes presentation? Maybe not.
And with that last questions, I think we are closing this hour and a half of conference. Thank you very much, Matteo. I think the feedback of the chats are very positive. Everybody seems to have taken a lot from this.
Nice. I sorry, Rafa, to maybe I want to say one last thing. So our idea is to basically collect questions from entrepreneurs during the week, or maybe a 10 days time, Rafa, and then jump on a podcast or a webinar where I will be basically answering the question that people offline will ask. Okay, so let's start maybe to use either the Twitter or the Instagram of Time Pledge that you see them here. So If you have questions or topics you would like